How's it going, guys? Hope you guys having a great week. So it is that time of the year, guys. 2019 has come and gone, and it is time to reflect on the past year and talk about the highs and lows of that year. So what I'm going to do every single day is I'm going to release a kind of review video, and I'm going to start the series by talking about the big three, so PlayStation, Xbox, and also Nintendo Switch, and then I'm going to give my top 10 games of the year, followed by my predictions and also expectations for 2020. So let's kick off today's video by talking about PlayStations. This is going to be PlayStation's year in review 2019 and generally what I thought about it. So pretty much this year for PlayStation, I thought they kind of had an average year. Their best year definitely was 2018. They had an incredible year in 2018 with some incredible exclusives. So of course, going into 2019, it was going to be pretty hard to top that, but I thought generally speaking, PlayStation had kind of a boring year and kind of an average year. So let's start off by talking about the exclusives that came out this year that are worth mentioning. There were 4 games this year that I think are worth talking about. We had Days Gone, which came out early on the first quarter of this year. Days Gone itself was a bit of a mixed bag, really. It had some really good elements to the game, like there were some really interesting elements and dynamics. So I really liked the dynamic world and weather system. I loved the hordes. I loved facing off against these hordes and trying to take them down, but generally speaking, the game just didn't really hit all the elements. It had a pretty boring main protagonist who wasn't really very likable, and the story was just okay. It wasn't an amazing story, but I just didn't feel as involved in his story, his background, and it was an okay game, but it wasn't an amazing title by any stretch of the imagination. It was just average. It was okay. The next game that I think was the best exclusive that came out on the PlayStation 4 this year was absolutely Judgement. That was the best game that came out this year on the PlayStation 4. Of course, this is by Ryuga Gotoku Studio, and those are the guys that brought us the very loved Yakuza series. This game is basically a spin-off of the Yakuza series. So it is set in the same world. It's set in the same area of Kamurocho, which is an area in Tokyo that the Yakuza games are set in. It's a legal thriller, and it follows, a brand new character. I loved this game. I love every element of this game. I love the story. I think the voice acting is fantastic. I've really enjoyed the gameplay. There is so much to do in this world, and it really just bring to life. It has all the best elements of Yakuza, but it sort of approaches it in a new and different dynamic. So I really have enjoyed Judgement, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best games that came out this year on the PlayStation 4. We then had Death Stranding, which came out at the back end of this year. Now, this game was so divisive. It was very much like Marmite. You either loved or hated the game, and I think that's to be expected of Kojima. Generally speaking, Kojima, you either tend to really like what he does, or it's really not your cup of tea. And I think, with this being Kojima's first original IP since Metal Gear Solid franchise and his first independent game after his break with Konami, a lot of eyes were on him. There was a lot of expectations on the game, and some people loved it and some people really didn't like it. Me, myself, I'm somewhere in the middle. I think the world itself was very interesting. It's an incredibly unique world. It's just like nothing you've seen. And what's really good about Death Stranding is it is unique. It's a unique title. It's quite a bold title. And it tries to do a number of really weird elements. Some of it gets right, like it has a really, great cast of characters. It has an A-list cast of actors behind it. Visually, it's a beautiful looking game. The soundtrack is haunting and really beautiful, and there are definitely moments in the game that really do stand out, but its gameplay loop, it's pretty boring. Obviously, you're a UPS delivery driver. It's basically a walking simulator, so that element of it was quite boring. So, you know, for me, it was an okay game. You know, it wasn't amazing, but I can see why some people would like it, and I can also see why some people wouldn't like it. It was just middle of the road for me, was Death Stranding. Then, of course, we had Concrete Genie, which was by Pixel Opus, and that was a brand new kind of original IP and a brand new indie title. Colourful, very colourful, visually stunning. I love the idea of it. The world is great. It's a nice little self-contained game that you can play, and it also touched upon some really interesting themes as well. So I enjoyed Concrete Genie for what it was, but again, nothing truly amazing. You know, there weren't any outstanding titles this year. There were no Gods of War, there were no Spider-Man, there were no Horizon Zero Dawn. There wasn't anything that was truly outstanding. Everything was just very much middle ground for me in terms of the exclusives that came out this year. We then had a really weird year for PlayStation in terms of announcements. We got to hear about the PlayStation 5, which is going to be coming out in November or the holiday season of 2020. But then the way that this was announced was really weird and just really mediocre. It was very casually announced through a Wired article written by Peter Rubin. It was an exclusive article with Wired that came out in April 2019, where they got to see a behind closed doors look at the new console and what the console had to offer. The article is an interesting read. It does talk about the tech and what the PlayStation 5 has to offer. You know, it's a way more powerful. It talked about ray tracing, 4K to 8K graphics. It talked about load times and how the load times for games were much faster. I think it compared load times in Spider-Man and them taking like 15 seconds on the PlayStation 4 and taking like 0.8 seconds on the PlayStation 5, which is mind-blowing and is absolutely amazing. We did get to hear, of course, that the console is going to be backwards compatible, that you will be able to play your PlayStation 4 titles on there, and that does make me very, very happy. And we have a rough release date window of holiday season 2020, but we don't know what the price point is going to be. And that, of course, is what people are interested in. But the way in which it was announced was really, really weird and very sort of under the radar, and was very strange that they chose to announce it in that way. We then, of course, had, you know, a number of really cool things that were done by PlayStation this year, which weren't really shouted about. So the cost of PlayStation Now, they cut that in half. You know, that's cool. PlayStation Now for me is an okay service. It's a great way to play your PlayStation 3 games and your PlayStation 2 games, but I still think that the Xbox Game Pass is much better in terms of a service. The roster of library of the library of games available on that is fantastic, but I think what really sets the Xbox Game Pass above PlayStation Now is the fact that all, you know, current new releases become available on that platform as well. And I just think PlayStation Now as a streaming service just isn't as good as PlayStation, you know, as Xbox Game Pass and xCloud. I just think they are superior to it. So that for me wasn't super interesting. We did get a little bit more announcements in terms of crossplay. So Sony this year did become a little bit more open-minded when it comes to crossplay. So obviously they talked about Fortnite now supports crossplay, Rocket League supports crossplay, and they are starting to open up to it, but still I don't think, you know, Sony does enough to really support crossplay, and I think it's got to come at some point. I'm hoping crossplay is going to become available with the PlayStation 5 when that comes out next year. Absolutely. I'm waiting to see Sony announcing more titles that are available for crossplay. I'd love to see some games like Borderlands 3, for example, even Anthem, even like, you know, Monster Hunter World. That would be fantastic to have that as a cross-platform game, a cross-play title. So I want to see more for that from Sony. I still don't think they're doing enough to really support that. And then finally we had State of Play, which was just really, really weird. You know, State of Play this year was kind of Sony's dabble into doing, you know, live announcements through sort of like, you know, similar to Nintendo's Nintendo Directs. It was, you know, their idea failure of trying to do that, but I think Nintendo are far superior at that. I think they've learned and they've really got it to a fine art, and it just felt like the state of plays really started off quite poorly. They had a bit of a rough start. There was too much focus on VR titles. They just came across a little boring, and I really missed having PlayStation at E3 this year and also at Gamescom, and I think that Sony were hurt a little bit for that. You know, those are huge events covered by the media, and I think just doing something private and quieter, I don't think it should be the way that they should be going, particularly when they've got, you know, their next hardware coming out at the back end of 2020, and they need to be talking about all the exclusive games that are going to be coming out with the PlayStation 5. I think they really need to be you know, using bigger modes and bigger methods of communicating with their fans, not just doing these state of plays, because I just don't think they're enough. I think, you know, the tone of them was very boring. Even the woman that was narrating it was very, very boring, and they just fell flat for me. I wasn't particularly a fan of State of Play this year. And then, of course, we had no PSX either, and they just seemed to do a lot of private events where they would have private, you know, journalists coming to have a look at The Last of Us Part 2 and getting hands-on with that game. And everything was very private and behind closed doors. And I don't know if they were going for like an air of mystery, but it just didn't seem to work for me for Sony this year. Let's obviously talk about 2020, because I think 2020 is going to be the big year for PlayStation. If you are a PlayStation 4 owner, I think you've got a lot to look forward to next year, and I think what Sony are doing is just sort of laying the groundwork for 2020, which is going to be their big year. We've got some incredible titles coming out next year on the PlayStation 4. Of course, we've got Final Fantasy VII Remake, we've got Last of Us Part 2, which I cannot wait for, and then we've got Ghost of Tsushima, which just looks absolutely beautiful and incredible. They've got 3 big hitters next year, so I think 2020 is going to be an incredible year if you're a PlayStation 4 owner. And then, of course, holiday time next year, we're going to finally have the PlayStation 5 dropping. We're going to have that releasing. I think it's going to come out in November 2020, and we have already heard about one title that is going to be a release title, which is called Godfall, which has been developed by Gearbox, the team behind the Borderlands franchise, and Counterplay games as well. And it is a looter slasher, so it's a new kind of genre where you play online with friends, I suppose. It's a third-person action melee combat type game. There's going to be loot, there's going to be leveling with your character as well, and yeah, it looks interesting. We didn't see much except for sort of a little bit of concept. We got to see visually how the game would look, and it did look really, really beautiful, but of course I want to see some gameplay. I want to see actually how it's going to work. So we've only heard about one title that's coming out on the PlayStation 5, and I think Sony really next year in 2020, they need to be announcing those titles. They need to be telling us what games are going to be coming out with the PlayStation 5 when it releases in November 2020, if they're going to want to encourage people to either stay with Sony into next generation, or to jump on board with the PlayStation 5, obviously if they've owned a Nintendo Switch or an Xbox One this generation. So I think they really needed to be announcing a lot more exclusive release titles coming out with the next gen console. I think that's something that they were quite weak in with the PlayStation 4. There weren't that many really good exclusive games that came out with the PlayStation 4. The opening lineup was a little bit weak. There wasn't anything that really blew people away. It was really in their second and third year that Sony really started to hit their stride and started to bring out some really interesting, unique titles. So I think they need to have a good starting lineup, definitely when the PlayStation 5 comes out. But that's my review of PlayStation this year. You know, generally a mediocre year, you know, a middle of the road year. They weren't amazing, they weren't terrible. There were some, you know, exclusives that you could pick up and play. There were games to play this year on the PlayStation 4, but nothing that really blew me away like it did last year. And of course, you know, State of Play was weak. PlayStation 5, I'm looking forward to. 2020, I'm really looking forward to being a PlayStation 4 owner, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go. And I just want to hear more about what those exclusive games are going to be. So those are generally my thoughts. So let me know what you guys guys think in the comment section below. What did you think of PlayStation's performance this year in 2019? What did you guys think of it? What games did you play this year on the PlayStation 4 that you really enjoyed? And what are your thoughts going ahead into 2020? What games are you looking forward to that are coming out on the PlayStation 4? And what are your thoughts on the PlayStation 5 next year? Are you going to be picking it up? Are you going to be buying it? Are you going to be waiting to see what games come out? Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts are. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Of course, I'll be back again with the next one in this series, which will be focusing on the Xbox One and the Xbox One X this year and how that has performed. And then I will be doing one on Nintendo Switch. If you did enjoy this video, please show your appreciation by liking the video, commenting below. Please share the video as well. Please subscribe if it's the first time you've dropped by the channel. And if you want to show a little bit of appreciation and you want to support the channel long term going forward, you can do that by jumping across onto my Patreon and becoming a Patreon, or you can actually join up and become a member of the N7 family, and the information in that is in the channel as well. Any way you can show your support is massively appreciated. Anyway, hope you guys are having a great week. Of course, take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye guys.